In this video, I would like to discuss the Baroque dance form known as the Passepied. The Passepied, while often overlooked in favor of the far more popular Baroque dances such as the gigue or minuet, nonetheless has some interesting traits worth highlighting. Like many Baroque dances, the Passepied has its origins in France, Passepied being French for pass-foot. Therefore, thankfully, this dance does not have any mysteries associated with the etymology of its name. Although most commonly known as a Baroque dance, the dance has its origins in the late Renaissance in the French Celtic region of Brittany. This folk dance, or branle of Brittany, was danced in a quick and lively tempo in either 2/4 time, cut time, or 4/4 time, in repeating 3-bar phrases. However, the Passepied eventually morphed into something completely different when it reached the court of Louis XIV. Here, it is easiest to define the courtly Passepied as something almost completely different, and is easiest to describe as a sort of fast minuet, so therefore it abandoned the duple meter characteristic of the folk dance of Brittany and adopted a triple meter. Even the choreography of the Passepied was similar to the minuet. As a courtly dance, the Passepied was generally performed at balls by one couple at a time, while the others would observe each pair. Because of the speed with which Passepieds were performed, the interest generally lied not in the perfect execution of steps, but rather the geometric patterns traced with the dancer's feet across the dance floor. In theater, the Passepied was generally used for pastoral or maritime scenes, often performed in pairs, whereby there would be a Passepied 1 and Passepied 2. The Passepied quickly spread across Europe to England, Spain, Germany, and Italy, where unique regional traits in writing and choreography materialized. However, the form as it was developed by the court of Louis XIV does have somewhat standardized musical traits. Firstly, it is to be performed in a quick tempo, and is generally joyous and lighthearted in nature, without the heat and passion that gigues often possess. They were also written in 3/8, 6/8, or 3/4 time, and generally possessed an upbeat. Passepieds, like many Baroque dances, are also divided into 4 or sometimes 2-measure phrases. Now this brings me to the standard Baroque Passepied of instrumental music, which is almost always in 3/8 time, possesses an upbeat, and 4-measure phrases. Another aspect is the use of hemiolas in a somewhat unexpected manner. An interesting example of this appears in Couperin's Passepied from his first book of pieces for the clavichord, whereby measures of 3/8 time give way to interjections of measures in 3/4 time. The measures of 3/4 time could very well be notated with ties over 2 measures of 3/8 time, but Couperin is being intentional about how he wants these measures phrased. Bach, for example, avoids this need to change meter by notating everything in strict 3/8 time, whereby he will generally tie eighth note beats over 2 measures of 3/8 time to insert the brief feeling of a straight 3/4 time into the piece, or at the very least one of the voices if the Passepied is more polyphonic in nature. This can also be rhythmically upscaled to a Passepied in 3/4 time, whereby quarter notes are tied over measures to imply a 3/2 time, as seen in the Passepied of Bach's orchestral suite in C major. This somewhat uncommon method of employing the hemiola is, in my opinion, one of the more unique traits of the Passepied, and seeing how the minuet does not do this, it's perhaps a bit simplistic to just refer to the Passepied merely as a quick minuet. As far as how such instrumental Passepieds were structured, well, this was often up to the composer. For example, the composer could opt for a binary form, the rules for which I explained in my video on the Allemande, or they could be a bit creative, like putting the Passepied into rondo form, as Bach does in his 5th English suite with his Passepied en rondeau, or doubling the dance with a da capo back to the first dance. And even sometimes, the aspects of a Passepied could be adopted as the subject of a fugue, which can be found in the F major fugue of the first book of Bach's Well-Tempered Clavier, or in the B minor fugue of the second book. The instrumental Passepied of the Baroque is well defined, but a question remains as to what Debussy was doing centuries later in his own Passepied from his famous suite Bergamasque, which, although linked to the traditional Passepied with its upbeat tempo and somewhat jovial mood, is not quite within the traditional mold of the standard Baroque Passepied, as it is written in 4/4 time. One could possibly say that this movement's almost medieval-sounding melody might be harkening back to the Passepied of Brittany, which are also in 4/4 time, and not the triple meter of Louis XIV's courtly Passepied. And while I like this theory of mine and want to believe it, apparently Debussy initially titled this movement as a pavane, which makes things stranger, as although pavanes are written in 4/4 or cut time, they are generally slow in tempo, which is not what Debussy does here. Theories as to what Debussy might have meant here are certainly welcome in the comment section. But that curious exception to the norm aside, beyond the historical importance of understanding what a Passepied is, and perhaps the influences a more modern composer might take away from the form, as Debussy does, it is nonetheless just as important for the performer of Baroque music to understand what a Passepied is, as well as its unique little eccentricities, in order to properly do the music justice and get as close as possible to the initial intent of the composer. Especially those fugues in the well-tempered clavier that make use of the Passepied, which a less informed musician might perform slowly, whereby a musician of the Baroque period would have instantly recognized the fugue as possessing the traits of the Passepied, and therefore would have known to perform it quickly without Bach needing to write a tempo indication. So I hope this video will serve as a short, helpful little introduction for musicians and composers alike. There is certainly enough interesting traits to the Passepied, especially when it comes to its rhythm, that a modern composer can make clever use of, whether they endeavor to write a Passepied or not. And if you're interested in learning more about harmony in a ground-up fashion, consider becoming a channel member for exclusive lessons.